Hello, Professor Toybox here, and I'd like to welcome you back to the Game Grid for my next episode of Toybox Tutorials. Today we're going to look at the Pinball Toys as we continue building a custom pinball game. But before we do, we need to correct the placement of the super cannons that we added last time. I used the wrong terrain seam in which to place them. So I've already moved all of the terrain blocks out of the way. I had used this terrain seam to place the super cannon, and I should have been using this one back here. So that's a problem. And I got one more block I need to move, and that's the one that's attached to this path. So we're going to come in here and delete the link to that block. And then we can go ahead and move this block, and I'm going to put it down here, just so it doesn't cause any collision box issues with anything else. So this super cannon needs to slide back to this point, and actually we've got one more block we need to move, and that's this one. So let's bring this up here out of the way. And I think I'll slide this camera around just to make this a little bit easier. But we want to get up as close as we can to that ramp, because as soon as the ball gets down the ramp, we want to launch this thing up the tube. And we actually slide this out just a little bit. Nope, that's too far. That should be good. Okay, so we'll do that. And then, of course, this one needs to be centered on that red target. So like that. And this one's centered on that red target like that. Okay. And then at this point, we can put all of these terrain blocks back where they belong. And I won't make you watch me place all of these, but you're going to put all of these back where they need to go. And now that super cannon will pick this up as soon as it comes down. So let me put these terrain blocks back, and I'll be back in just a moment. Okay, I've placed all the terrain back, and the super cannons are in their correct places. Last little tweak I'm going to do is this ugly tower. We don't actually need to shoot this high, so I'm going to take most of these blocks out. We don't need those yellow ones at all. That is going to be sufficient, and we'll cap each of those with one of these blocks. That's what I had in the original trailer, and I like the look of that. It's very simple. Okay, so now that that's done, let's get back to today's lesson. And you can find the Pinball Toys in the Gameplay Toys drawer. So let me scroll up to get those. And there's 4 of these. First we have the left and right pinball flippers. Excuse me. By default, the flippers will automatically react to any player or object that gets near it. So players, townspeople, and enemies simply get pushed aside, as you can see, but physics balls will be launched a good distance away. And then we have the pinball bouncer. Any physics ball that touches this toy will automatically be repelled in the other direction. It doesn't affect players, townspeople, or enemies. And then we have the pinball bumper. And this instantly repels any physics ball that touches it as well. And once again, this toy does not affect players or townspeople or enemies. So let's look at the properties and logic connections for each of these toys. And actually, even before that, let's go ahead and place them into our toy box. We'll go ahead and put these down, and then they'll be in place and we can look at them a little closer. So let me pull up my screen grabs here for how to position these. So this one's going to sit right in here, as you see, like that. We're going to put a second one up here off the end of that corner like that. And then the left one will go right across directly from each of those, like you see there. So that's pretty straightforward. The first of the bumpers is going to go right up the middle, and you're going to put it right across from that little diagonal block over there. And then for spacing, we'll put down 4 more of these. Come back to the middle, and you're going to go over half a step from the edge of this, so right here, so that if you did 1, 2, 3, you end up with that. And there are the bumpers for the middle of the table. All right, the next one is going to go up this way. And we're going to line this up over here, the left edge of this with the edge of this block here. All right. And on this end, we're going to line it up with the seam between the wall and that first diagonal block over there. So just like you see it there. And then the next one is going to go a little further out. We're going to line this one up so the center of it is lined up with the edge of that first flipper down there. And in this direction, we're going to line it up with that diagonal block across the way. Now the next one will be over here like that. And on this side, we're going to line up with that terrain seam. So we're going to come half a block this way. And then the next one is over here, lined up with the edge of the terrain seam, like you see there. And we're going to line it up directly across from the other bumper on the opposite side. Just like that. And then the final bumper, we're going to start about halfway onto this one. So that's where that's oriented. And for our reference point, we're going to come over this way. And we're going to line up the center of it with the point of those blocks right down that way, those 2 diagonal blocks. So that's where this one goes. And that's all the bumpers. For the bouncers, the first one is going to sit right over here off the edge of that bumper, like that. Okay. And then this will sit over here on this terrain seam, back about like that. And another one right here, and another one up against the wall over here. All right. And I'm just looking for the placement of the next one here. We're going to put another one down this way. On the edge of that seam, and we're going to line it up right there. And the placements of these do matter, by the way, so you don't want to just kind of get it in the ballpark. You want to be very specific. It took a lot of experimentation to find the placements of all of these blocks, or all of these bumpers and bouncers. So you want to make sure that you put these in the exact same spot, or the ball isn't going to go where it needs to. It can get stuck bouncing around and doing different things that it shouldn't be doing. So that's important. All right, so this one will sit out here, and then a second one over here like that. Actually, a little bit further. Another half a nudge that way. That way? No. No, that was correct. Alright. And I'm thinking... Gosh, that kind of matches the screenshot, but it sure seems like that's sticking out further away from that wall than the original did. But that's correct. Okay. Alright, so there are the placements for all of the bumpers and bouncers and flippers. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and start taking a look at each of these toys. First up, we have the flippers. And as I open the logic menu for these, you'll notice there are no properties, and there's only one trigger signal. It's called action. So when something triggers the flipper and it moves, which right now happens automatically, that'll cause this trigger signal to go. Now this toy also has a behavior, and so we're going to use this button to hook that up. So on the button we'll do a new logic connection when pressed, and each of the left and right flippers has one behavior, and it's called triggered. And when you connect that up, so now we have a logic connection to this, then when the player or a ball or anything else comes near this toy, nothing will happen. So the logic connection, having that overrides the automatic behavior. Without that logic connection, it behaves automatically. With the logic connection, it does not. It's only going to move when you tell it to move or some other toy tells it to move. And so that's very important. And we'll go ahead and hook this button up to all of those bumpers and do the same thing. And this button is not what we're going to use in the long term, but for today it'll demonstrate what we need to demonstrate. And I kind of like pinball machines that have multiple sets of flippers, because it makes you feel like you've got a little bit more control. And also when the ball's further up in the game, you can kind of maybe work to keep it up there. Alright, next up let's look at the bumpers. And we'll open the logic menu. Once again, there's no properties. You can connect this one to a path, and that can be really useful if you want to make a really interesting pinball game. There is one logic connection. It's called flipped. So whenever a physics ball touches this, that will cause this trigger signal to be broadcast. And there are no behaviors, so you can't connect up another toy to this one. And the bouncer works exactly the same. It's just a little bit different looking. Again, you can connect it to a path. You have the same logic connection, and there are no properties. There are no behaviors. So now that we know what these toys can do, let's hook these up and play around with this a little bit. So we're going to use this button to kick everything off for today. So I'm going to hook this up with a new logic connection when pressed to our falling object generator, and we'll generate the bowling ball. That's what we're going to use for our pinball today. And that will get sent up this chute by the super cannons. And then, as you saw last time, once it gets out over here, it just kind of dies. So in order to make the ball move the way we want, we have to simulate gravity, because this table that we're built here is flat. The toy box is flat, but a pinball game is tilted. So to simulate that, we're going to use the Weathervane, which we looked at in an earlier episode. I've already placed that out here, and let me pick that up. Again, that's in the Creativitoys drawer. And we need to hook this up to a locator to indicate the force of direction. And on the properties for the Weathervane, force 10 is fine. Affected objects, we're going to set it to just affect the physics balls. And once again, this toy is off by default. And so when the ball leaves the chute, we want to turn that on. We don't want it running when the ball is going up the chute because that's going to be counterproductive. So I've set up a little trigger area down here off the end of the chute, and we can connect this up with a new logic connection. When entered by physics ball, we'll come over here and turn on the Weathervane. That'll start pushing the ball in that direction and simulate the gravity that would be in play in a pinball game. And then the ball will move down this way. We can use our button over here for today to push these little flippers. And if it gets through here, at the back of the pinball game, I've set up a racing gate. And I could use a trigger area here, but I wanted to use the racing gate to show you that there is another use for this besides racing. So on the racing gate, once the ball reaches down here, before we launch another ball, we want to turn off that Weathervane. So on the racing gate, we'll do a new logic connection. When crossed, always on, that will basically mean whatever passes through here, not just a player, but it includes a physics ball. We can come over here and turn off the Weathervane. And the ball, once it crosses this, is just going to be sitting down here in the bottom of the pinball machine, so we want to remove that. So on the racing gate, a new logic connection. When crossed, always on. We'll go to the falling object generator and remove all. Okay, so we have the ball being dropped by this button over here on the right. It'll go up the chute. When it reaches the end, that turns on the Weathervane to simulate gravity. And then we come on down this way and we can use this button to flip those flippers and try to keep the ball in play. Now when it touches one of these, it's going to actually make a sound, but you're not going to hear that sound unless you're standing pretty close to this, which we won't be. And so to kind of demonstrate the logic connection for this, I've got a sound generator set up over here. And I want to go to the properties for that and turn off 3D sound at speaker or locator. And all of these bumpers are going to do the same thing in our game. We want them to play the same sound. We also want them to increment the score by the same amount, which we're going to do next time. So rather than hook up 2 logic connections for every bumper, we're going to route those through a logic gate. And likewise with the bouncers, we're going to put those through a logic gate as well. So for every one of these, you're going to connect this up with a new logic connection. When flipped, we're going to come over to this first logic gate and input. All right. And then for every one of these, you're going to do a new logic connection. When flipped, go to the other logic gate. And again, we've looked at this before in other episodes. And input into that. And then the one for the bumpers, we'll do a new logic connection on output. We'll connect that up to our sound effect generator. And under the general category, we're going to scroll down and look for the ding sound. That's the closest thing we have to the pinball bumper sound. And for the one for the bouncers, we'll do a new logic connection on output. Connect that up to our sound generator. And for this one, we're going to go to Action. And I'm going to select the thud sound. And we'll hook up scoring on those logic gates next time. I don't want to deal with that today. All right, so you'll do that for each and every one of these. So I'm going to go offline and do that, and I'll be back in just a moment. Okay, I am back, and I've hooked this logic gate up to all of the bumpers. I've hooked this logic gate up to all of the bouncers, or more accurately, all the bouncers up to that one, all the bumpers up to this one. So next time when we hook up the scoring, we just make 2 logic connections, and all of those toys out here in the field are automatically covered, so that'll be really nice. But let's go ahead and demo and see what we got. So we'll put the ball in play first. Down comes our ball. Goes through the thing. You can see it's kind of bouncing around in there. It's kind of hard to see from this angle, but we'll fix that next time by hooking a camera up. And one of the things you'll notice, using the button works, but there's a bit of a delay. By the time we push the button on the game controller and the time that Mickey actually pushes the action button and it moves the flipper, there's about a half a second to a second delay. And so that makes it pretty unresponsive. So the action button is not a good toy to use for controlling the flippers. We need a better toy, so next time we're going to begin looking at one of the more advanced toys in the toy box, the remote controller. Until then, I want to thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed my video today. If so, please hit the like button and leave a comment before you go. You can also subscribe to my channel by clicking my photo in the lower right corner of this video. Have a great weekend.